Natalia, platform-mediated domestic and care work differs from other categories like Uber drivers or delivery workers. What sets it apart?
Yes, so basically it is true that care work or care services provided through platforms, they, let's say, retain some specificities in comparison with food delivery, ride hailing, and many other services like freelancing as well, which are provided through platforms. When they are basically, well, first of all, there is one aspect which I think is quite interesting to highlight, which comes also through our research, which is the fact that care platform, of course, they use algorithm, they use the technology, but the technology is not only used to control, or not often used to control the workers, and this is a particular element of differentiation in comparison with the food delivery riders and ride hailing. So this kind of pervasive algorithm control, which also comes very much through research, existing research, including our own. So we see that basically on a care platform, let's put it this way, it's not that we are saying that the algorithm doesn't exist, but it's not the only issue here. Mainly what we see is that this care platform tend to focus particularly on matching people, care services, delivery sort of care services on the one end, and clients. And they sometimes also use other forms of control, which are in fact not only technologically or algorithm based, and which normally involve more the kind of, if you like, sense of caring, the morality, the ethical sort of aspects, which are mainly directed to these specific kind of workforce, which, as we know, are in the majority of the cases female workers. I'm not saying that they are not male, of course they are, but the majority of the workforce working through platforms, care platforms, are also, of course, women. Yeah. So that's the main issue, I would say. So it's not, well, of course, there is also another aspect to be said. There is not one model. There are different ways in which operations are developed through these care platforms, care and domestic. Well, we don't need to forget the domestic aspect as well. But as I said, I mean, what is important here is the fact that the technology, the algorithm control, direct control through algorithm is not only the main focus for this sort of platforms, the way in which they operate. So that's why also people talk about, different now. There is a kind of interesting development in the study of care platforms, people also thinking in terms of different typologies and forms of classifications of these platforms. But the model of the marketplace, as it's normally used, retain also importance within within this specific cluster of platforms.
Yeah. In any case, although they are not that impacted by algorithm, they are still considered self-employed people. Yeah, they're never an employment relationship, which is
of course.
Sorry.
Yeah, there is there is no employment relationship, of course. There are, in fact, always care workers which are, considered self-employed. To what extent then they are real self-employed is another issue. That is a kind of element, if you like, of similarities across care platforms, food delivery and ride hailing. to some extent. A bit different the situation for freelancers through platforms, which are apart the kind of click workers, but they are also real freelancers who retain their own way of considering themselves freelancers to platforms. But going back to the issue of the care platforms, so these are these are in fact not classified workers or employees when they provide care and domestic services through these platforms as well. So that is a similarity of element across these different platforms.
As you know, one of the biggest issues in domestic work is informality. Over 80% of domestic workers worldwide are in informal employment. Based on your research, do digital labor platforms tend to increase informality in the sector?
Yeah, well, first of all, the word informality has a specific connotation, a specific definition, which is the definition of the ILO of what informal work is. Undeclared work, not normally, covered by rights, not being able, to use rights, which normally are attached to any form of, work and employment per se. So if we use this definition and then we apply this definition in this way, well, what appears from our research, particularly in the European settings, but I would say that probably this could be, formally speaking, kind of expanded also in other institutional settings. So what emerged from our research is that, in fact, the informality, so the platforms informalize work, and we have been writing on this informalization of work through platforms. In what way? In the way in which, in fact, platforms casualize work. When these workers, they provide services through platforms, they normally, in fact, because they are not considered formal employees, they are self-employed, they don't actually get any guarantees, any social protection from a legal point of view. So, of course, they are automatically in this kind of area of sort of informality. The second aspect that we see here is not just the lack of rights and the lack of social protection and legal regulations which protects those workers, but also we see, I said before, this element of casualization of work. So, workers don't know when they are going to work. Okay, they can, of course, have a sort of agency in terms of deciding and when they want to work, but when they will access work is another thing. And so in this kind of lack between when they decide to plug in and to decide to work, and when they get work, that's another interesting aspect, which in fact contributes to kind of make this work casual and on demand, which normally workers don't know when this will happen. There is also another thing, and I want to say this very clearly, that and we use also this very much in our research. I mean, of course, when these workers work through platforms, what platforms they do, they formalize the economic transaction. Yeah. So that is the way in which the formalization works. But they informalize the employment relationship because, in fact, those workers are not conceived to be employees and workers, but they are, in fact, categorized or not even categorized as employees, and they are considered being self-employed. So there is this kind of, so going back to the issue of the informality. So the informality comes from the fact that people cannot enact their own rights. They don't exercise rights because they are not into this arena of the employment relationship, which in fact the platforms tends to informalize. And this is where we see the problem, basically.
According to your research, digital care platforms operate differently across local settings. How does it affect the working conditions of platform-based domestic workers?
We see that platforms tend to be present, at least in the European region, in places where the need for these kind of services is there, right? And that probably is the same kind of issue also in other regions, in other parts of the world. So platforms tend to be there where you have clients and where you have workers, of course, where the supply, the labor supply and the labor demand is there. What we also do see in the European region, and that was a kind of interesting insight, is the fact that, platforms are not, let's say, resistant to the presence of, strong welfare systems. So platforms tend to be actually present in those kind of also regions where welfare systems are quite strong. Like, for example, Scandinavian regions, like also, in Germany, for example. We see a lot, although welfare system in Germany works in a completely different way. But, so even in Belgium and in France, we see, in fact, the platform are present. Now, the question is, why is that? Now, the point is that, our study, which was a comparison between Belgium and France, is quite, I think, interesting, because it shows that platform can operate in two different ways. They can operate by, kind of dismantling to some extent. Let me use this word, although probably is not the right one, but, they try to disrupt the system. So, for example, in the Belgian context, where we have a strong welfare system, we see the platform, when they operate, they tend to operate outside the scope of this welfare system. But of course, they take advantage of the needs that are there and which are not covered perhaps by the welfare system itself. So that, and here we are talking particularly about care arrangements. Now we know that, and this is particularly, I think, in Europe, but I think is also outside Europe, particularly in the care and domestic sector, people talk about labor shortage, right? So there is a lot of labor shortage, and therefore people are in needs more and more. So we see that, in that kind of sense, we see, in fact, the platform are present to kind of respond to this kind of needs. And in doing that, sometimes, as I said, they go outside the welfare, so they don't operate, let's put in this way, within the welfare system. They work aside, or they work in a complementary way. And so they complement their kind of lack or absence of the welfare in trying to respond to the needs of a population which is, so growing, and where, in fact, there is no possibility to be served by the existing infrastructure of care arrangements existing in Belgium. For example, talking to some, also workers and platforms managers, we discovered, and this is very interesting, that, for example, if there is an old person, and there is a need for elderly people to be cared during the weekend, this is a service which cannot be supplied by the welfare. So even though you have a strong welfare care arrangement system embedded into the welfare system, then you cannot actually use that system over the weekends. So what you do, you use platform work, right? So you use care services provided through platforms. Now, if we go to the French system, and the French system, let's put it in this way, is a bit more structured and functions in a completely different ways, where, in fact, as we know, now, to be very short, there is a system called CESU, which actually allows to clients to even employ workers that they need for, taking care of care or domestic duties at home. Now, what platform they do in France, as we also have extensively written about that, they don't really disrupt, they don't work complementing the welfare system. They actually enter into the system, because the system is made in such a way that, either you can employ the worker by, doing yourself the job and looking for, or you use a platform as an intermediary to actually help you in matching your needs with the worker that will then serve and, comply to the duties that you want him or her to be done. So, what I want to say here is that the platform are not actually, well, in that sense, are very chameleontic, as Steve Vallas and Juliette Shore, they wrote in a brilliant paper a couple of years ago, in the sense that they adapt to kind of institutional settings in which they operate. And they have this chameleontic sort of behavior. And we see this chameleontic behavior very much in place in the regions and the countries we have been investigating. But again, then the point is, when they do these things, what happens? And there we see again this issue of informality, which operates across different systems. Because at the end of the day, for example, even though in France you would expect, okay, then the platform actually helps the client to get workers, and then these workers get employed, hopefully or eventually by the clients, this often doesn't happen. Now, you might say, why? Well, we know how the undeclared and informal work works. So, we see that in some cases, these workers prefer then to, just to operate outside the system. And there is also a lot written in research showing that the majority of the cases, this is what then happens when a worker and clients, they are matched. So, even the payment is not actually mediated anymore by the platform, is, taken outside the realm of the digital, let's say, space. So yeah, that's how then works, basically. And that's, what we see, at least in the European context.
If it's properly regulated, can the platform economy stop being a threat to care workers and turn into a real opportunity?
Well, of course, platform could be an opportunity. Why not? But the point, in fact, is to bring them into the area of regulation, right?
Yeah.
So we know that platform, to some extent, they operate like kind of digital intermediaries, right? Intermediating and matching clients and workers. But in the majority of the cases, they don't take over the responsibility for doing that. And this is what is missing. Going back to Belgium, Belgium has a very interesting system, a triangular relationship, where intermediary organizations that intermediate domestic work are actually even covered by collective bargaining and collective agreements. These workers are into the realm of, regulation, but this is not the case of the platform. And this is the big issue, I think. So platform could be an opportunity, but an opportunity, needs to be an opportunity for the workers. And if it's an opportunity for the workers and not only for the clients, this means that the workers need to also get the kind of benefits of working and providing services through the platforms. And they can do it when they are embedded into an employment relationship. Now, I'm not kind of saying, self-employment is not interesting solution here. Of course, it's an interesting solution, but the question is to say then, what is the nature of the work which is performed by these domestic and care workers? And there, if we get a bit more into the nature of the work, and we go and look at what these people they do, well, these people are not really performing kind of work under the umbrella of a self-employment. I mean, a self-employed, a freelance, is somebody that takes risks, right? Takes risks, and when he takes risks, then gets out of the business that he or she does, gets back the money that he or she has invested for this risk. So he's an entrepreneur in that sense. And what we see is that this is not happening when people perform services through platforms. They just take risks, but they are not covered by any possible. So the prices, in other words, that they set are not big enough or not generous enough to then give them the opportunity to have the return on investment, as normally the entrepreneur logic in economics would say for somebody who should be considered a real self-employed.
On many platforms, domestic workers are misclassified as self-employed. That cuts them off from legal protections for domestic work. Is there also a risk that this misclassification pushes them outside the umbrella of the organized domestic workers movement?
I do think that we are not here thinking to fragment the labor force.
Yeah.
There is no reason for doing that, because in fact these people actually, we need to bring these people under the same umbrella to make possible that the working conditions of these people are negotiated in a kind of equal way. So we are not promoting, in fact, divides here. We're not promoting, different working conditions depending on who is the organization here that is taking care of these domestic workers. This will be, if this would happen, would be very deleterious. It would remind me the model in the UK with single level bargaining, company bargaining, where this promotes a lot of fragmentation and a lot of course, inequality raising, right? This is not what should be. These workers are doing the same work and they have to be paid and have the same conditions protected because of the same kind of tasks and work that they are doing. So I think it's, I would certainly also kind of reiterate the importance of keeping those workers under the same sectoral kind of umbrella, and in that respect, the domestic one, which is very important. The ILO has important conventions on domestic work. So, we don't have to reinvent the wheels. We just need to use the kind of tools that have been already created for protecting those workers.
After this year's ILC resolution, the ILO plans to adopt a convention on decent work in the platform economy in 2026. Will that be enough to protect platform-based domestic workers?
Well, first of all, it is very important that we do have a convention, so and there is this kind of new legal opportunity. So we are all very happy about that, and this is an important steps forward for sure. Whether this will be enough to cover domestic and care work, again, I really do think that probably it won't. I would say that, it needs to be rethought with the eyes of care and domestic work, which I don't think has been done at the very beginning. And that was particularly my reflections when I read it. Yeah.
Yeah.
There are many aspects that are not, they don't really reflect. I mean, you can see that the eye is really the eye of the food delivery, the eye of the kind of other other form of work which are mediated through platforms, but the care and domestic aspects are not really taken into account. For example, all the issue of harassment, all the issue of health and safety protections are not really addressed properly, and this with many others should be done. But nevertheless, I think this is an important step forward.
Why is domestic work systematically excluded when broader cross-sector regulations are discussed?
Yeah, there was, well, one of the feminist scholar in the 70s, Silvia Federici, in 1975, right? And she was talking about housework and waged housework. And she was talking about the violence. She was using the word violence when she was looking at the way in which women not being paid for doing domestic and care work were treated. And the reason why she was saying this is simply because she was saying, well, these women actually, because they are not even paid and their own work is not even conceived being work, they are in fact not, they don't even have the possibility to go on strike, to struggle for their own rights. So I think now, and by the way, and this is interesting to see, sometimes in platform work, you bump, at least I've been, facing situation where people were conceiving this work not even being work. This is no work. This is something that people do because, if there is somebody you want to help. And so the idea of the shared economy, right? You do it for help. So you go and care for people, you go and help people in their own household to clean their own house. So, and so why should we? And this is a kind of way in which you legitimize certain way of certain economic transactions. Let's put it this way. So, we see these things going back, and then, of course, these people are paid, and not that they are not paid. They are paid, but they are paid, of course, not much, but they are paid. But still, they are not, they remain in this kind of blurring line between, doing something which is conceived being perhaps no work, and because it's no work done by women who actually have the skills to do that, and they acquire these skills not through vocational training or other forms of training, but they learned from their own mother. So why should we pay them for doing these kind of things? Okay. And this is the kind of rhetorica which comes back also when people perform these tasks through platforms. So it's a very complex issue, but I really do think that the question of work is very central. And probably this could be something to think upon, to trying to kind of link the inside and outside market perspective when thinking about work.
Yeah.
Particularly for care domestic.
Yeah.
Which should be paid independently and regardless from where this work is done. That's the point. And I can see that because they reflect on the nature of their own work. They know that they are no entrepreneur. They don't decide about, for example, that you can say, well, but, some extent they decide on the price. Well, they can decide on the price, but the price is not decided by them. It's decided by the market. And as long as there is a market, which then, in fact, jeopardize via competition the possibilities of those workers that perform services through platform to decide on the prices, then these are no entrepreneurs, these are workers.
Yeah.
There's a lot to do before the convention is adopted to make sure domestic workers are included, and we are on it for sure. But there's a lot to do after two to get countries to ratify and implement the new convention. Since regional settings are so different, are there any good practices or strategies from Europe that could work in other regions?
Well, what I would say is that, well, first of all, I mean, there are a lot of possibilities which, well, a lot of possibilities. I know the political situation is not the best in all parts of the world, but nevertheless, different countries could try to, kind of fight for the protection of the rights of those workers vis-a-vis their own governments at the very moment. Although, as I said, I mean, at least if I look at Europe, the situation looks very patchy and very difficult as well. So there is, yeah, we have to wait and see. But nevertheless, there is a possibility for doing that. On the other hand, I think what probably we could think is that care and domestic platforms, as well as many other platforms, particularly I think the care and domestic one, they're also very much they look at their own image. And they are very open, I think, for not being considered doing something which could be conceived being illegal, or something which could be conceived being not moral, not ethical. So I think that in that sense, working with the platforms as well could be an opportunity. And we, at least we have been doing this in Belgium. We are part of the FAIR network, which is coordinated by the Oxford University, the Internet Institute. We have been releasing our final report on the scoring, how this platform have been scoring, platform operating in Belgium have been scoring in the last year. The report has been released now in May 2025, and we do have some care platforms there who, after the release of the report, have been getting in contact with us to talk to us and to express the interest to work with us to improve their own models, which was something very interesting. So I would say that, using this kind of approach also creating coalitions between, research and labor unions in a kind of, and platforms as well, and workers in a kind of more general way could perhaps help. And I don't know whether this is maybe the same situation in other countries, but in Europe or outside Europe. But certainly, our experience has been quite positive in that respect. So, working with platforms who care about their own image is very important as well.